Hi everyone, this is your one full-on lesson for the week, and that's what everybody should be able to do, because even if you're in school you do have 2 periods out with that. Otherwise, if you're at home, you should be studying, following all the resources that I've put in Teams for you, and it's key that you do that, because although we've completed the course, you do need to go over the things that perhaps you've missed, or something that's maybe gone from your mind a little bit more, and keep practicing all these command words as well. So today's lesson is adapting or reprioritizing a PDP. We have done this in class before, but it's really good to remember how we did that, because it's a long time since we did these PDPs, all of these personal development programs, or personal development plans you would call them. So moving on to the first slide. So sometimes in the exam you'll see words and questions asked in different ways than perhaps we've set them. But don't panic, it's just a different way of saying it. It doesn't mean you don't know it, it's just about thinking, well, what does that word mean? And the word today we're going to look at is reprioritizing. So sometimes the SQA use that to ask whether you've had to reprioritize your goals or targets or your PDPs. And what does reprioritize mean? It means to change, to adapt, to modify, or to make something more suitable. So that's what we're going to look at today, when we had to change, adapt, modify, or make something more suitable. Now, you might have had to do that when you were at home doing the PDPs for softball, but I know that when I was teaching the girls class in sprint training, we adapted nearly every session. So this question should be fairly easy for you in terms of describing how you adapted, but we're also going to look at explaining why you adapted as well. So when do you know that you need to adapt or reprioritize your PDPs? It's basically through your monitoring. Now, we monitor through using the training diary every session, your midway tests, and you can monitor using feedback. Now, of course, there's 4 different types of feedback. You've got internal, verbal, visual, or written. So any of these feedback sources might have indicated to you that something's not going very well, or something's going really well, and I definitely need to change things. So that's when you would know that you need to change your PDP, or reprioritize it, because perhaps it wasn't suitable, working well, or perhaps it was too effective and you've reached your goals far too quickly. So you may have needed to adapt your PDP in some way. So when did you need to change it? You may be experiencing a little bit DC. Now, I know that's not very memorable, but you may have been experiencing a little bit DC. You could have experienced some boredom, you might have been injured, you could be experiencing tiredness during it, you could have been distracted during your PDP, and you may have just completed it really quickly. So that's why, these are the reasons why you need to change it. But of course, if you're moving on to the next slide, you also need to be able to explain it in detail in the way that the SQA would want it. Now, of course, please remember, a lot of us were getting it mixed up in the feedback that I've been giving. For explained questions, for all explained questions, we use a P chain, which is point, example, sometimes you could call that evidence, point, example, explain. And the only time we use FACI is if it's asking specifically about a factor's impact on performance, or a factor's impact on another factor. So the only time we use FACI is for impact and performance. For every other explain one, we use a P chain. Don't forget that. A lot of us were still getting that mixed up. So, and in the exam, don't panic if you walk out, or in the assessment I should say, don't panic, walk out if you got it the other way about. Usually you should have been able to cover all the points in it. But here is how you would explain why you would reprioritize, and it's using the bit DC layout, but we're putting it into P chains. So I'll read through this, or well, I will read through this just now. So the first one, this is because you're the B, the board. Your point would be, I had to reprioritize my PDP because I was bored. The example that you could give would be when I was completing my sprint drills, my agility drills, or my Rogers Spry drills for your physical factors. We were doing the same thing every session, and I was getting really fed up of this. Now, the impact of that, which is where you would explain, is meaning I was not trying my hardest and not improving as much as I should. So that's just explaining why you had to reprioritize. The next one would be the I part of the bit DC. It is, I had to reprioritize or adapt my PDP because I had an injury. The repetitive movements of my sprints, Roger Spry, or agility drills had caused strain on my ankles. This is just a fake example, you've got your own examples. Meaning I was not able to try my best and was not improving. So these are the reasons why. It's not what you did to reprioritize, it's why in detail did you have to reprioritize. The third one is the T of the bit. DC is I had to reprioritize or adapt my PDP because I was finding it far too tiring. The target I'd set for my initial sessions in the sprints or the Roger Spry or the agility drills was too challenging, and by the time I got to the end of the lesson I was too exhausted. Meaning, now the explanation for that in terms of how it would impact you negatively would be meaning I was not completing it to the best of my ability by the end and was not improving my speed, agility or flexibility by that point. If you're having to give up by the end of it and you're not doing very well at the end of your sprints or your flexibility drills or your agility drills, there's no point really in doing it because you're not doing it well. So you won't be improving that factor, you're just exhausting yourself even more. So you would have to reprioritize what you were doing in some way. The fourth one there is the D of the bit DC, which is I had to reprioritize or adapt my PDP because I was getting distracted. Now I am absolutely certain that for all of you, you might have been distracted at some point. And that is because when I was trying, and this is your example, when I was trying to complete my centering, PMR, investigating model performers, peer team interviews, so any one of them, you were completing them in a room or an area with others in it. Now that could have been at home for your softball factors, or it could have been during school for your football, netball or volleyball factors. You were completing these things which need a lot of attention in a room with others in it, and the explanation as to why you would need to change what you were doing is meaning I was not able to focus because of the noise they were making and did not complete it to the best of my ability. The last one there, which is the C, bit DC, is I had to reprioritize my PDP as I found that I had achieved my targets. Okay, so basically you were complete. So when I completed my midway test roles and responsibilities question for softball, this is just an example, bear in mind, I found that I'd reached the target I'd set of understanding my role when fielding. So if you were doing your investigating model performers at home for softball, you might have found that, okay, I did one session of it and actually I know what I've got to do in fielding now. So why would you continue there? So meaning I did not do anything else, as it would be a waste of time when I could be developing other factors. So you might have just finished your roles and responsibilities development program because you were done after one session. Why would you do it again? So that's why you would have to reprioritize. That's a good example. So that's how you would explain why you would reprioritize. But these are my examples. They're not exactly yours. They could be yours, but you might have your own relevant, real, more memorable examples that you might want to use. But we'll come on to that. So another thing we need to look at is describing what you would do to reprioritize. Now these are just tiny wee examples. This isn't describing, because as you know, to get 1 mark for describe in higher, you need 3 points of description. So these aren't descriptions, these are just identifications of the things that you could do. So you need to be able to expand on that and describe what you actually did. Now all of you will have adapted your PDPs at some point. So the kind of things that you could do is add competition into your sessions. So for example, in your sprint training or in your agility drills, you may have wanted to try doing the part of the drill at the exact same time as a partner and try and beat them. And that might be because you were bored, so when you add a bit of competition, that's when you get motivated. You might want to remove a session, that might be because you were injured or you were too tired. You might have wanted to add a session if you found that you were finding it too easy. You might have wanted to add more equipment in, or some equipment at all. When you were doing it in the agility drills, in the sprint training drills, you might have added a ball in. You could have added music into your session. You could have changed the area that you worked in. Remember, if we're talking about being distracted, so you might have wanted to go and do it in your own area of the AstroTurf or in a different room or on your own. You could have taken time off and focused on something else. Because you were injured or you were too tired, or you could have changed the factor development. So for example, if you did your roles and responsibilities investigating model performers, you might have wanted to move on to a different factor because that one was complete. So those are the kind of things that you could describe, identify as to how you would reprioritize, but you need to be able to describe it in detail, and don't forget you need 3 points of description to get 1 mark. So move on to the last slide. Finally, using today's lesson, these PowerPoint slides that I've given you there today, I want you to complete the assignment, which is in Teams now as well. Explain why you had to reprioritise or adapt, I've just put that there just to remind you, a PDP. Now there's 2 marks, so you need to choose from BITDC, as to why you had to adapt your PDP. Now make it real to you. Most of you, and all of you, should have had to adapt at some point. Or at least 2 points. So pick one of the bit DC and give me an explanation, a P chain, as to why you had to do that. It's not what you did, it's why you had to do it. And then what I want you to do is describe how you reprioritized or adapted. Now that's for 2 marks, so you're going to need 6 points of description as to what you did. So you might want to give 2 examples, or you might want to give a very long-winded example of what you did. It's up to you, but I would probably give 2 examples for each. So in the explain one, I would give 2 examples of why you had to reprioritize, and the describe one, I'd give 2 examples of how you reprioritize. What did you do to make the changes to reprioritize? Okay, so do that in assignments now. Don't rush it. Let me see your good work, and take care of everything. Keep studying when you're at home, and I hope the sessions are going well in school. And I will speak to you soon. Take care.